You know how in video games and in cartoons, the characters usually have just the one outfit that's like their main outfit? If I was a cartoon character or a video game character, this would be my main outfit, or something similar to this. Just a plain black jumpsuit, something nice and comfortable with pockets. So anyway, I wanted to give you guys some book recommendations today. So let's go over to the bookshelf and take a look. Back in 2019, when I first got into bullet journaling, one of the spreads that I made was I made myself a reading log. So it shows when you started a book, when you finished it, the title of the book, the author, and how I felt about it. I didn't even write down like any of the thoughts or things like that. So this was back in 2019. I've since upgraded this system because now I'm digital journaling. And now I have this spread, which is a book slash movie spread, but I have mostly been using it for books. And here, the same thing, I like to write down when I started it, when I finished it, what category it belongs to, how I felt about it. So I rate each of the books. And then I write down, I have a separate area where I get to write down my thoughts on the book and how I felt about it and the things that stood out to me. Wow, I've rambled on for a while. Let's get started with books for young readers. So not necessarily YA, although majority of these are YA. I do have a few recommendations for younger readers because I find some of the YA books aren't necessarily appropriate if you have younger children in your family who aren't in the teen years. I really encourage you to do this. If you have younger children in your life, then really read the book with them. Whatever you give them, make sure that you have read it first. That way, if they have any questions, if there are any topics that are somewhat difficult, you will be able to discuss them because you've read along and you know what's happening in the book. With that said, let's start with the most obvious, of course, the Harry Potter series. My favorite is book 3. As you can tell, it's very well loved. It's so well loved, it's coming apart. This is not my fault. I take very good care of my books. Unfortunately, I also don't mind loaning my books out to people, and sometimes things like this happen. Anyway, Harry Potter series, definitely recommend. Really fun read for both adults and children alike. I know that the kids now growing up, well, that makes me sound so old to say that. The kids growing up now, they're not reading Harry Potter, they're reading the Crimes of Grindelwald series. I saw the movies. I don't know if there's even a book, or maybe they're just watching the movies. I saw the movie, the second one, I wasn't blown away, it kind of annoyed me. I still recommend the original ones, of course. Alright, so Harry Potter series, I'm not going to talk too much about that because I'm sure you know about it by now. Second, I would recommend, this is great for a younger reader. Front Desk is a series about this immigrant family, so a Chinese family that immigrated to the United States, and then it talks about their struggles with facing discrimination and just basically getting their footing in a new land and all the people that they encountered along the way. It's a work of fiction, but it's based on the author's life, so Kelly Yang's life, and I just really loved how heartwarming and just it's such a positive message to be giving young children these days, especially with all the hate and the us versus them rhetoric that we hear around us. It's really good to have books like this that show that we have more in common than we do our differences. Next, we have The Little Princess, one of my favorite books. It's not just for girls just because it says princess. This is a story about a young girl who finds herself in an orphanage, and she goes from being really rich and being like at the top of the heap in the boarding school to being like losing all her money and her inheritance and then being bullied and being forced to sleep in an attic. But the thing that I really like about this book is that throughout her entire story, she stays true to who she is and the importance of being true to your word and your friendships. So this is a really great book that I would highly recommend to any young children. I have another series to recommend called The Land of Stories. This is written by Chris Colfer. If you remember him, he was an actor in the show Glee. So he wrote a series of books called Land of Stories. And it's a really fun, light read. I read this with my niece and nephew together. And it was fun because whenever we would get together, then we could all talk about it and the things that were happening in the book. So it follows the story of two children who find themselves in a fairy tale land and the adventures that they experience along the way. I think this was 7 books. How many books was this? Let's see. Chris Colfer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 6 books. So yeah, that's a really fun read. Next, we have The House on the Cerulean Sea. So this is a bit of a slow burn. It actually took me a while to get into it, but once I was into it, I was hooked. Expectations, it's about breaking out of your bubble and your comfort zone and seeing people for who they truly are versus how society has taught us to see them. It's a really good book. It's very heartwarming. I think I cried in the end, even though it wasn't like a sad ending. I was just so happy with I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything, which is why I'm trying to give you like a very vague overview of the story. Moving on to a little bit of a darker series, I suppose, The Hunger Games. I really enjoyed. It's one of the ones that I think I read in 3 days. So this is definitely more of the YA category because there are some themes that wouldn't be as suitable for a younger reader. So definitely read it first before giving it to your child and see if that's something that you would want them to explore. So the Hunger Games series, I'm sure a lot of people are more familiar with this since they also made it into a movie. But it's a really fun read. These aren't in any order, by the way. This is just as I see them on my bookshelf. I'm writing them down. Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Nang. I really enjoyed this book. This is a story about 2 different families coming from 2 very different parts of society. They're 2 very different mothers, and how they're choosing to live their lives and how they're choosing to raise their children and how that impacts their kids. I think that's what it's about. Other people might disagree with me, especially if you watch the series. As I understand it, the series is not about that, so I don't know. I really like the book though, so I definitely recommend it. Next is Room. Who wrote Room? This is why I have to write it down. I can't remember anything. Room by Emma Donoghue. I know this is also a movie, which I've never seen because it sounded like it was too scary for me to watch, but I really enjoyed the book. I actually listened to this on audiobook and it really left an impact on me because the reader would do the voice of the little kid as she was reading. Oh, that reminds me of another book that I didn't write down. ADHD. Okay, let's see. I was talking about Room. Room is about a young woman who was kidnapped and is basically forced to live in a room by her captor, and she eventually gives birth. And I'm not spoiling anything by telling you this much of the plot. It's her life and her journey towards escaping her captor. So that was a really good read, really fun, suspense. Yeah, just really good. Next we have Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. So this is a love story. Should I say that? It's not a love story. It's not a love story. What I really liked about it was, well, no, I'm not going to tell you what I really liked about it because it'll kind of spoil the ending. But suffice to say, it's a really good book and I would recommend it. The next book I would recommend is Pachinko by, once again, I have to reference my notes, Min Jin Lee. So it is a story, it's one of those multi-generational stories where you follow one family across multiple generations. In this case, it's a South Korean family. It starts off with them being with the oppression they experience under the Japanese rule, and moving on from there. I'm not going to spoil it for you, so that's all I'm going to say. I find that I really enjoy these multi-generational books and I tend to gravitate towards them. Like I've read 100 Years of Solitude, another one of those types of books, and The Lowland, which was also really good. But out of all of those, I would definitely recommend Pachinko over all the others. It's really good. Next, we have The Devotion of Suspect X by Keiko Hagishino. This is a really good mystery novel. There's just so many twists and turns along the way that you wouldn't suspect. So I really enjoyed it. It's about, how much can I tell you without giving it away? Dang, this is hard. Okay, I'd say it's about this woman. Is that in the beginning? You know what? Just in case, I don't know if this might be a spoiler because I don't really remember which part of the book this happened in, but I'm just gonna say it because I don't know how to describe it otherwise. It's about this woman who murders her ex-husband, and her neighbor covers it up for her. But at the same time, there's a police force who's investigating the case, so it's kind of like the cover up and the investigation happening simultaneously, and you have to see towards the end who will win out. It's really good. All right, next we have The Midnight Library. I really, really love this book. Who wrote this book? Sometimes I feel like my brain is a sieve and my thoughts are just like pouring out from it and I'm unable to contain them. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So good. So good. One, I recommend this to everyone that I come across, and I just read it recently. It's one of those books that I read it and I instantly loved it. It gave me so many warm and fuzzy feelings. So it is about what's not a spoiler? It's about a woman who commits suicide. This happens in the beginning of the book. And she is transported to a library where she gets to choose different paths of her life that she would like to explore. Like every time you make a choice, your life goes in a certain direction. Now, say you had the opportunity to see specifically which points in your life would have made a difference to the path that you were going to take, and then you can, jump in from that point and see the differences that those choices would have made. So that's The Midnight Library. It's really good. I really like it because I am the type of person who would think, oh, what if I did this instead? Or what if I went to that school instead? Or what if I dated this person instead? What would my life be like? And it just kind of explores that concept, which I found really interesting. Possibly one of my favorite fiction books of all time, George Orwell's 1984. Definitely a must read. I read this over 10 years ago and it greatly influenced my life and my outlook on life. It's about it's a dystopic society, and it's about how we tend to give up little freedoms in exchange for conveniences, but do we really think about what we're actually giving up? One of my favorite books of all time. Have I said that a lot in this video? I have no idea. One of my favorite books of all time is Jennifer Egan's A Visit from the Goon Squad. This is a book that I loved so much that I've read it several times. You know what I like about it? Each chapter is written and approached in a different way, which is really interesting as a reader. Like they have not only does each chapter focus on a different character, but it's also literally done in a different way. Like this one chapter is given to you all in as if it was a PowerPoint presentation. Like it's just so unique and different, but the story itself is really good as well. So I highly recommend this. I'm trying to be quick. I'm really trying to be quick. This is the one that I added to my list last. So it's Neil Gaiman's The Ocean at the End of the Lane. I don't know if I would recommend this to a younger reader. I myself found it quite creepy, but it's a really good book. And of course, it's Neil Gaiman, so you know it's going to be like really well written. It's another fantasy novel. I clearly have a preference for those. And let's just say it's a little dark. It's not that big of a read, so I'm not even going to give you the plot. I'm just going to say you should check it out. It's really good. Whoa! Guys, it is a clear blue sky out there. I have no idea where that came from. Oh, that was weird. Anyway, moving away from dark and creepy books, next we have... Do I? Yes, I do. I have a physical copy of it. David Sedaris' Me Talk Pretty One Day. I don't know if I should consider this fiction because I know David Sedaris is mostly writing about his life, but in a more comical view. This is just one of the ones that he's written that I find so funny, like laugh out loud funny. Definitely check this out. That's it for fiction. I'm gonna stop the video here. Should I talk about nonfiction? I don't have as much on my list for nonfiction. Let's just record it. We're already here. I don't particularly enjoy nonfiction books, but I will read them because I find that, they are helpful in the end if you find a really good one. Anyway, next is the Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. Honestly, when I first read this, I was not a fan of this book. I always say this: the state of mind you are in greatly determines whether or not you will like a certain book. And I was not in a good place when this was first given to me, so I didn't like it. But then I'm so glad I gave it a second chance because I read it after a couple of months and I really enjoyed the book. So, my main takeaway from this book is you are responsible for your own happiness, nobody else is responsible for that. So, if you are unhappy, then what can you do to change that? Next, I have The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. I absolutely love this book 100%. She has this one part where she talks about getting into a flow state, how doing creative work is kind of like running a marathon. Like, that's what it feels like for me. When you start, you don't want to do it, and you grind away and you work and you work and you're running as fast as you can, and then life brings you interruptions like a text message or an email, and these aren't necessarily bad things, but when the flow is interrupted, it's basically like running full speed and hitting a wall and having to start over from zero. So she had something like that type of analogy in the book that super hit me hard, and that's one of the things that helped me to realize that in my personal workflow, especially when I'm doing creative work, I can have no interruptions. Interruptions are like the number one hindrance when it comes to doing something creative for me. Next is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It's really good. It's about how to create habits, how to create good habits, and how to break bad ones. So he breaks it down for you, the science of how to make a habit and how to set it up so you succeed in the habits that you want to make. I really liked it. I really liked all these books. I'm gonna stop saying that. Obviously, I liked all these books because why would I be recommending them otherwise? Along the same lines, after reading The Power of Habit, I would recommend that you read Atomic Habits by James Clear, one of my favorite books. I liked it so much that I actually read it twice, and the second time I took down notes. I took down notes of everything that he talked about because I wanted to be able to just reference it easier for myself. There was a lot of things that I really liked about his book, like setting systems for yourself in order to kind of trigger habits. I really liked his idea about how location and setting is important when it comes to habit building. Like, you will automatically do a thing when you get to a certain place. I was talking for so long, my phone died. I have no idea up to where it recorded. Let's just okay, I'll try to speed it up. So James Clear talks about how your habits should inform your identity. If you identify as a certain way, then your actions should back that up. For example, if you identify as an athlete, but you never exercise or work out or do any sports, then are you really an athlete? It's that kind of concept. All right, I'm going to try to be quick because my phone is dying. The Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman. The Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman is another really good book that I recommend, especially if you are struggling with things like, how come this person says that I don't value them in our relationship when I'm doing my best to show them that I love them? Or how come I feel like I'm not receiving any love from this person even though they say that they love me? So it's about how different people have different ways of communicating love, how we give and how we receive love. And if we are aware of that, then we can build better, stronger relationships with each other. I'm so proud of myself. That was so succinct. Let's see. How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen by Joanna Faber and Julie King. These are two psychologists, and they basically made a book on how to properly communicate to younger children. So I read this book because I used to volunteer at the Sunday school in our church, and I was so overwhelmed because I just felt like it was so easy for me to communicate with my nieces and nephews, of course, because I love them and I see them every day and they know who I am. But then all of a sudden to be thrown into this room with all these little kids who didn't know who I was, who had no reason to listen to me and didn't really see me as a person of authority, I needed to find a better way to talk to them, so I read this book and I really, really recommend it. It teaches you how to talk to children the way that you would want to be spoken to. I think that was one of my main takeaways from the book. Like, little children, just because they're little doesn't mean their feelings are any less valuable than our own. How would you feel if you were having a really bad day and somebody just told you, like, oh, now it's not the time to indulge in those feelings, or now it's not the time to be angry or to think about that? Like, that would just annoy you more. So imagine speaking to a child in that way. They're having a temper tantrum, and instead of listening to them or giving them a chance to voice out those thoughts, you just tell them, now it's not the time to be annoyed, be quiet, let's go and do this instead because I have a thing that I need to do. So it just, reframes your thinking when it comes to talking to little kids. What else? I'm almost done. Austin Kleon's Steal Like an Artist. It's another one of those books where I found that he was so insightful that I kept making notes and jotting down like his little thoughts. It was very helpful for me. So if you're in an artistic field, I would recommend this book. The E-Myth Revisited. This book, I admit, it's not going to be for everyone, by Michael Gerber. So Michael Gerber talks about how everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, but how we think about entrepreneurship and how we approach it is kind of like setting us up for failure. Yeah. It makes sense in my head. I find that it's really hard for me to convey the thoughts that just make sense in my head because I've never tried to put them into words before. And lastly, we made it to the end. The last book that I would recommend is Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers, and I would recommend getting the audiobook over the actual book because he produced the audiobook to be like his podcast, Revisionist History. So he has voice actors for all the stories that he wants to tell, and there's music, and it's paced really well. So it's a really good audiobook to listen to. So these are all my book recommendations. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you will share your book recommendations with me down in the comments below. That's it for this week. I will see you all next time. Bye! 햇빛이 비추는 날 내 맘에 꽃이 폈다